When we think of sports injuries, we usually picture these massive catastrophic moments,
Oh, totally.
like a football player taking a huge tackle or, a downhill skier catching an edge at 60 miles an hour.
Right. It's loud. It's obvious. The physics are entirely transparent in those moments.
Exactly. But before we get into the one sport that breaks all those rules, we are Brent and April. And welcome to Pickleball Partner, the podcast.
So glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, today we are doing a deep dive into a really deceptive issue. Our mission today is to explore a major, mind-blowing assumption in the sports world. We want to figure out why pickleball elbow is actually worse than tennis elbow.
It is such a wild contradiction.
It really is. I mean, you might think playing a sport with a lightweight paddle means a lighter toll on your body, but today we are going to shatter that assumption.
Yeah, because we look at the tools of the game, right? A tiny plastic wiffle ball and a paddle that weighs like less than a cup of coffee.
Right.
And we just make these immediate incorrect judgments about the biomechanical toll they actually take on the body.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the foundational reality here is pretty blunt. It's not the paddle weight.
No, it's really not. What's fascinating here is that our brains are just heavily wired to look for easy external fixes.
Oh, completely.
Right. Like when we feel discomfort, we want a quantifiable, purchasable fix. If my elbow hurts, the paddle must be too heavy.
So naturally, I need to go to the store and drop $200 on an ultra-lightweight aerodynamic carbon fiber model.
Exactly. And we think the pain will magically vanish. We blame the object because, well, blaming the object requires absolutely no behavioral change on our part.
It's basically the ultimate consumer mindset applied to joint health. But focusing on the paddle weight is a complete red herring. Is focusing on the paddle weight like blaming the type of computer keyboard you use for carpal tunnel, when the real issue is your typing posture? I mean, are we just blaming the tool instead of the technique?
Yes, the keyboard analogy works perfectly there. Because a keyboard is stationary, but when you're playing a racket sport, you are absorbing the kinetic energy of a moving object entirely through your arm.
Okay, so how does that look in something like tennis?
Well, in tennis, a heavier racket actually forces a protective mechanism. It requires significant muscular force just to move the thing, so your body naturally recruits the entire kinetic chain.
The kinetic chain meaning your legs, your hips, your core.
Exactly. When a tennis player winds up for a heavy baseline drive, their brain anticipates the weight of the racket and the impact of the heavy ball.
Right.
So it pre-activates the large muscles of the back, the deltoids, and plants the legs. The force is distributed across the whole body. But pickleball players are holding this remarkably light tool.
Which feels completely harmless.
Right. The brain just doesn't sense a massive threat, so it doesn't bother engaging that full kinetic chain.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's not the heavy impact doing the damage. It is chronic, repetitive stress from high volume hitting.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanics of pickleball require these rapid, continuous strikes.
Let's break that down geographically, I guess, because a standard tennis court is, 78 feet long?
Yeah, 78 feet. So a tennis player hits a heavy, sweeping baseline drive. The ball travels those 78 feet, bounces, the opponent tracks it, winds up, and hits it back.
So there's a lot of built-in downtime.
Exactly. The time elapsed between a single player's strikes can be anywhere from 3 to 6 seconds, sometimes longer. During that window, the player gets a momentary biomechanical reset.
The muscles actually get to relax. The muscles relax, the blood flows, the tendon recovers its resting length. But a pickleball court is less than half that size, 44 feet.
And players rarely stay at the baseline. Everyone rushes up to the kitchen line.
Right, which means players are often standing a mere 14 feet away from each other. Wait, so because the paddle is lighter and the court is smaller, players are actually swinging more often. Does the easy nature of the paddle trick the body into an extremely high-stress, high-volume environment?
That is exactly the trap. It completely vaporizes your recovery window. When 4 players are in a rapid-fire volley at the net, we aren't talking about seconds between hits.
We're talking fractions of a second.
Fractions. Tap, 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 tap. You're engaging that exact same forearm muscle and elbow tendon repeatedly, demanding rapid contractions without a single moment of rest.
Wow. Are we essentially short-circuiting the tendon's natural reset period?
Yes, on a cellular level, absolutely. Tendons have a very poor blood supply compared to muscles. They need time to clear metabolic waste and reset between loads.
So in tennis, those 5 seconds between strokes are literally a lifeline.
They are. But in pickleball, you deny the tendon that lifeline. The tissue is held in a state of constant low-level tension. That is the very definition of chronic repetitive stress.
So what does this all mean? Like, what is the actual biological consequence of this?
Well, the ultimate biological result is severe microtrauma to the elbow joint.
Severe microtrauma, which honestly sounds like an oxymoron. How can it be severe if it's microscopic?
This raises an important question about how we perceive injuries. You know, when we hear trauma, we think of that football player from earlier, a snapped bone. That's macrotrauma.
Right, it's one catastrophic snap, an event.
Exactly. But microtrauma is a process. Every single time that lightweight paddle strikes the ball with an isolated wrist flick, a tiny, almost imperceptible vibration travels down the paddle and into your elbow tendon.
Just a microscopic fraying of fibers.
Yes, just a tiny disruption.
It sounds like bending a wire back and forth. One tiny bend does nothing. That's the micro part. But high-volume, repetitive bending will eventually snap the wire entirely. That's the severe trauma.
That is the perfect analogy. But it's actually sneakier than the wire because your body actively hides this from you.
What do you mean?
Tendon sheaths don't have the same immediate, highly sensitive nerve response to microscopic tearing that your skin does. If you touch a hot stove, you pull away instantly.
Because it hurts.
Right. But you can be on the court for 3 hours, executing thousands of rapid-fire dinks, systematically causing microscopic tears, and your brain isn't sounding any alarm.
So you don't even feel it happening. You just wake up the next day and go play another 3 hours.
Exactly. And because you aren't resting, the body rushes the repair process. It lays down weak scar tissue instead of strong, elastic collagen.
So you are basically rebuilding the tendon with cheap materials while actively continuing to tear it down. That is wild.
It is. By the time you actually feel that burning pain on the outside of your elbow, the architecture of the tendon is already compromised.
Man. So, okay, with all that in mind, we need to talk about solutions. What are some simple ways to prevent this elbow pain while playing? Because we obviously still want to play.
Oh, definitely. First and foremost, you have to loosen your grip.
A death grip on the paddle is bad.
It's terrible. It transfers all that vibration directly up into your elbow. Hold the paddle like you're holding a little bird. Firm enough so it doesn't fly away, but loose enough that you don't crush it.
I love that visual. What else?
You need to manually override the brain's laziness. Stop relying entirely on your wrist to flick the ball. Lock your wrist and force yourself to use your core, your hips, and your shoulders to push through the shot.
So consciously engaging that kinetic chain, even though the paddle is light.
Precisely. Make the big muscles do the work so the tiny elbow tendon doesn't have to.
That makes total sense. Now, what about before we even hit the court? We need to create a daily warm-up routine, right?
Yes, absolutely. You cannot just jump onto the court cold. A great daily routine starts with basic wrist stretches. Keep your arms straight, palm facing up, and gently pull your fingers down toward the floor for 30 seconds.
Okay, stretching the flexors.
Right. Then flip your hand over, palm down, and gently press the back of your hand down to stretch the extensors.
30 seconds for that one, too.
Yep. Then you want to do some slow eccentric loading. Grab a light water bottle or a 1-pound dumbbell.
Okay.
Rest your forearm on a table with your wrist hanging off, palm down. Slowly lift the weight up, and then, very importantly, take 3 full seconds to lower it back down. Do about 10 to 15 reps.
So the slow lowering is what builds that healthy collagen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It tells the body to organize the tissue properly. Finish up with some dynamic shoulder rolls and torso twists, and you are ready to play.
That is such a simple, actionable routine. So, to summarize our takeaways here, we've learned today that pickleball elbow is deceptively worse than tennis elbow, not because the equipment is heavy, but because the mechanics of high-volume hitting cause chronic repetitive stress.
Right.
And that leads to this incredibly sneaky, severe microtrauma.
And that is exactly why understanding the why behind an injury matters so much. Recognizing that mechanics and repetition matter way more than the physical weight of your equipment is essential for anyone doing repetitive tasks.
Whether you are playing pickleball, typing, or painting a house. Which leaves us with a final, slightly terrifying thought for you to ponder. If the mechanics of high-volume hitting are causing severe microtrauma to the elbow joint, what other joints in your body are silently absorbing this chronic repetitive stress during this seemingly low-impact game?
Ooh, that is a great point. Like, think about the knees.
The knees, the hips, the Achilles tendons, they're all taking that high-frequency impact.
Definitely something to keep in mind next time you're out there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to Pickleball Partner, the podcast. We really appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to the next deep dive.